Hello, my name is Todd Yates, and I'm going to tell you about Business Process Model and Notation, or as it's commonly known, BPMN. What is BPMN? It's a way to represent business processes in a graphical or visual manner. It was developed by the Business Process Management Initiative, also known as BPMI. It is currently maintained by the Object Model Group, or OMG, after the two organizations merged in 2005. Bpmn was originally known as Business Process Model Notation, and in version 2.0 is now called Business Process Model and Notation. Who uses it? Well, in my role as a project manager at an airline, I use it often and I have for years. Others include business analysts, technical users, and several types of business users. Why do we use BPMN? It gives us a common language, so to speak, whenever we're modeling business processes. It allows a single model to communicate ideas to both business people and technical users. This communication helps bridge the gap between business users and technical implementers. Just a few thoughts on what BPMN is not. It is not useful for describing or modeling organizational structures, nor is it particularly useful for functional breakdowns like how a machine works. It is also not very useful when describing data stores or data models. Okay, we'll start with the basics, the foundation of BPMN. For the sake of brevity, we'll stick to just the basic structures. Just be aware that there is much more detail that can be included using additional BPMN notation we're not going to cover here. The two basics that we're going to explore here are flow objects and connecting objects. There are other parts of BPMN like swim lanes and artifacts that we won't be covering. So, flow and connecting objects. We have three flow objects to talk about. First, there's event objects represented by a circle. We show three here. One on the left for a standard start, also one for an intermediate event represented by a double circle, which might be, say, a pause in the process for an input, for example. A bold circle signifies the end of a process. Next is the activity object, represented by a rectangle with rounded corners. A standard task is represented by the first rectangle. A rectangle with a plus sign notation means it is representative of a sub-process that is likely documented elsewhere, but has too much detail to be represented in this model. A double border rectangle is representative of a transaction like a bank deposit, and a bold border rectangle represents a call activity, which is a global process or task which is usually reused often. Next we have gateways represented by a diamond. Gateways typically represent decisions or turning points. Special forms of the gateway object include the exclusive, in which multiple input paths exist, but the input is only taken from one, or where there are multiple output paths and only one is taken. Gateway objects can also be inclusive in that all inputs go to all outputs. And lastly, there's a parallel condition in which all inputs go to all outputs, but only when all inputs are ready to go together. To wrap up the basic objects, there's connectors, represented by various forms of lines. A solid line and arrow signify flow in the process or sequence. A dotted line and arrow signify flow of a message, and to show associations between objects, we use a dotted line without arrows. So those are the basics, and to show an example, here's the process model for how I did this project. It has a start, shows the tasks in which I picked and researched the topic, created the presentation and practiced it, and then a gateway object where I evaluated whether the presentation did what I intended and fit in the time allotted. Note that the object itself isn't a diamond but rather a hexagon. This is perfectly acceptable if the description is lengthier than what would fit in a diamond, which can be restrictive. If I didn't meet my quality and time parameters, the model loops back until I do, and next I post to the discussion board and manage the discussion. And of course our process model shows the end of the process when I get a well-deserved A. A couple of questions for you to think about. There are other modeling techniques available. What others have you used, and how is it better or worse than BPMN? Number two, using your own point of view, describe how you or a colleague either use or could use BPMN in your job and what advantages it would provide. Thank you.